Appreciate your spending time with us here today. Greg Dow from Central Church of Christ is here to do our invocation. We appreciate that. Greg, I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Pray with me, please. Father, we want to acknowledge that you are God. You are holy, you are mighty, you are powerful, and you are just. And Scripture also reminds us, Father, that you are compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. May we live our lives reflecting the realities of your character. We also ask that you give this governing body courage, compassion, discernment, so that they can lead our city. We pray for the people of our community. May they have a sense, Father, of your presence. Our greatest good is you. I pray that your nearness and your presence will always give us greater peace and hope. As our nation elects its leaders today, we acknowledge you as Lord. We are thankful for our country and our democracy. But no matter our political preferences or the outcome of an election, you are God. You are the great shepherd. You are the Almighty. You are our Lord. And our hope and our salvation comes from you and you alone. May we be people who put their complete trust in you and extend your love and peace to others. Amen.
We have with us today our municipal court team, and I would like to invite you guys to come up here. We're going to read a proclamation about Municipal Court Week. Y'all come on. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Jared. I thought we had a little opening there. Yeah? This is a very important team in the city, and they do very impactful work. So we're glad to celebrate with them Municipal Court Week, and I'm going to read a proclamation about it. Whereas municipal courts play a significant role in preserving public safety and promoting quality of life in Texas, and whereas more people come in contact with municipal courts than all other Texas courts combined, and the public impression of the Texas judicial system is largely dependent on the public's experience in municipal court, and whereas the city of Amarillo is committed to the notion that our legal system is based on the principle that an independent, fair, and competent judiciary will interpret and apply the laws that govern us, and that judges and court personnel should comply with the law and act in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Whereas Amarillo municipal judges are not policymakers for the city of Amarillo, but are bound by the law and the canons of judicial conduct, and they are required to make decisions independent of the governing body of the city council, city officials, and employees. Whereas it is appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Amarillo Municipal Court and salute its critical role in preserving public safety, deterring future criminal behavior, and protecting the quality of life in Amarillo. And now, therefore, we, Mayor and City Council members of the City of Amarillo, do hereby proclaim November 7th through November 11th, 2022 as Municipal Court Week in Amarillo, Texas, in recognition of the fair and impartial justice offered to our citizens by the Amarillo Municipal Court, given under our hands and seal of office this 8th day of November 2022, signed by all of the city councils. So, Donna, do you want to say something? She's our Director of Court Services.
I just want to say thank you for acknowledging the work that the staff at the court, the judicial members, and the prosecutors all do every day to help the citizens. And I do want to acknowledge two of the people we have here today. They have almost 48 years of service with the city, Karen Lacey and Sandra Dahl.
Wow. Well, we appreciate Donna Knight as our court director, and also Judge Hamilton, and everything that each one of you do to provide these services for the city. So thank you very much for your efforts. Here we go. We're going to take a picture real quick if you don't mind. Thanks. I love how Donnie and Alan have just self-appointed themselves. Thank you for the picture crew. It's very helpful. Thank y'all.
Yeah, I made a comment about that earlier.
I'm going to start and stay still for a second and then get out of here. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, at this time, we'll move to the public address portion of the agenda, and I'll pass the microphone to Stephanie Coggins, our moderator.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for participating in today's City Council meeting. Your input and your opinions are important to us, and we are glad that you're here to share them. At each posted meeting, we invite our fellow community members to address City Council regarding posted agenda items. Every speaker has 3 minutes to address council. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a warning beep will sound to alert you that you have 30 seconds left to wrap up your thoughts. We ask that you stay within your allotted 3 minutes. Speakers are asked to limit your comments to items on the posted agenda. We have a couple of public hearings on the agenda today, so if you're here to speak on one of those items, we would ask that you make your comment either during public address or the public hearing, but not both, in order for us to keep accurate records. And it's your choice on when you would like to speak. When you come to the microphone, please state your name, whether or not you live in the Amarillo city limits, and please state if you are speaking on, for, or against the items that you are speaking on today. Again, thank you for being here to share your thoughts with us. We have 4 people signed up for public address today. The first is Tim Ketting, and on deck after Mr. Ketting will be Michael Ford.
My name is Tim Ketting. I'm here to speak against agenda item E. I live outside the city limits, but I have a business within the city limits, Plains Builders Incorporated. I'm one of the owners of Plains Builders. We submitted a bid on the new transit project. Our bid at the time that it was submitted was a low bid by about $289,000, and it was about 40 days faster construction time. We inadvertently forgot to include within that bid 2 forms that the federal government requests that are included in there. We were notified by the purchasing department that they were going to consider our bid non-responsive because we had not included those 2 forms. We spoke with Mr. Kepley at the purchasing department, and we also contacted the Federal Transit Administration to see about asking for a waiver on those forms. We have filed the waiver form with the Federal Transit Authority Administration, and we have yet to hear back from their chief counsel. It's our understanding that until the chief counsel has made a determination on that waiver request, that an award cannot be made on that project according to the federal guidelines. And so I would just ask that the city hold off until we hear back that waiver, because if the waiver is successful, the city could save $289,000 and get it built faster. Even if they weren't successful, if it was put back out for rebid, it would take y'all 3 weeks to do it. You know that there's a very good chance that you would still save that money by rebidding the project without any significant scope change. And if we turned in our bid 40 days faster, that 3 weeks wouldn't matter on the construction time. So my request is that you do not award that project, especially until the General Counsel for the Federal Transportation Administration has made their ruling, which is according to federal guidelines. I understand that they have made a preliminary contact with the city, but we have yet to see, and we have contacted the Federal Transportation Administration, and they have not made a ruling as far as we know of as of yesterday afternoon. So I would hope that y'all would reject that award until the rest of the information has been submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ketting. Next, Mr. Ford, and on deck next after him will be James Skank.
Justice, just a little bit. My name is Mike Ford, Amarillo, Texas. I feel like the widow in Luke appearing before the judge seeking justice, and I'm going to continue to remind you that the false statements of law that come in here regarding public address, anybody wants to step up here and say anything in the world, they want to talk about the Astros, they want to talk about today's election, they can do that, and that guides your discussion here. If the gentleman before me, if you'd wanted to have questions with the gentleman before me, he said, I'm speaking on agenda item 3, whatever it was, you could have had that conversation. And Madam Mayor, what your interpretation does is it robs your city council members of an ability to have that conversation with their folks, the people who have elected them. And that's the most egregious thing of all. And Mr. City Attorney, who's sitting there not looking at me, he never looks at me during these conversations, he is also providing a false statement of law. Both lawyers have been into the State Bar of Texas. That is a violation of the public rule of the rules of professional conduct. I'll let you look it up. But you continue to violate the law by and Ms. Coggins' statements there. The executive session that you're going to be going into today, you're going to be voting to perhaps discuss appealing the recent court decision where basically everything that was contested was reversed or voided. I would suggest nothing's going to change in the record, in the evidence before you in that case, and it's difficult to even fathom how these two paragraphs were adequate public notice. How could they be? 22-page ordinance authorizing the issuance of $262 million in tax notes, and this was you think this is worth going appealing on. That was adequate public notice. There's not one mention of $262 million in either of those paragraphs. And that alone, just one item that was reversed. And we've talked about that before. If you don't follow the Open Meetings Act, everything you can do can be reversed. What happened is you ran into somebody who says that's enough, and they actually had the money to go and risk that money in a court proceeding. They were potentially facing $1 million in judgment if they did not prevail. And that's the way this city council and the city is run. Things happen. You run it right up to the law or beyond the law, and you challenge anybody to go sue you in court. And that's the way that works. And most people, I would say 95% of the people, cannot do that. But you ran up against someone who could. And thank God for Alex Fairley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Next, Mr. Skank. And our last public speaker after him will be Catherine Traves.
James Skank, City. All good government begins at the local level, so does all bad government. And we certainly have been experiencing some bad government, especially this last 6 months. I I know on the item today, y'all are going to just have a work session talking about upcoming debt issues. Well, we've just been fighting a debt issue in a lawsuit since May. Thank goodness for Alex Fairley. I want to speak just for 1 second on 2K. We got this Kimberly Horn that's fixing to get $110,000, and they were the group that held our PDP consultants. And I think that thing was falsely brought. I don't think 80% of the people in there agreed with what was happening. If they did, it really was melted down to about 15 people, and I was included in that and attended all of them. We were pushed down a little road of just increasing fees, and we knew that from the beginning. One other point I want to make is on 3A and B on tiers. You know, it seems like we're just almost abusing this tax increment reinvestment. Maybe we should just make the whole city, because, you know, we just got through replacing an AC, heating, and, you know, we could use some reinvestment money coming back out of our tax. Just local citizens, you know, when you have to remodel and do things, but yet we just have it for the select few and maybe to attract some people. But we do have the lowest tax in town, in the state, as you know, and that should attract enough. Okay, today's voting day. I wish this was an election of this council. We'll wait until 23. Because, you know, like I said, what a summer. The lawsuit decision was succinct and voided everything. As you read over the claim that, well, I can just say this. I think you're getting bad advice, even from one of the wealthiest or one of the most expensive law firms and maybe even local counsel, on what you should be doing. Because realistically, you knew this wouldn't go anywhere as far back as June, I would say, because the AG would have never considered allowing this to happen. But yet, you continued to push it forward, and here we go. Millions of bucks. Thank goodness for Alex Fairley. No one told him you can't sue City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Skank. And our last speaker, Ms. Traves.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about something happy. I am Catherine Traves, president of the San Jacinto Neighborhood Advocates, and we are looking forward to being a recognized neighborhood association through the city of Amarillo. We began meeting via Zoom in the spring of 2020 during the pandemic. Then we took advantage of our beautiful San Jacinto Park that summer to meet in person to form SJNA. We have worked very hard obtaining our 501c3 status and solidifying our board members, as well as building our general membership. During the last 2.5 years, we have worked with Emily Kohler and her team, as well as several city departments. Change can be very difficult, as you all know. Emily has worked extremely hard to help us implement creative solutions for making San Jacinto a cleaner and safer place to live, while also celebrating our diverse population and our rich Route 66 history. Some of the projects that we have completed or are in the process of or are ongoing include lighting up the neighborhood and re-envisioning San Jacinto Park, neighborhood block watch with the assistance of Officer Amanda Williams, installing additional and creative crosswalks, dead tree removal, the sidewalk repair cost share program, the San Jacinto Art on Route 66 project, and the painting of the Route 66 emblem and Visit Amarillo logo on the water tower. We're also adding street sign toppers to our neighborhood that can be sponsored for $100. So get out your checkbooks or donate at our website at sjnamarillo.org or on Facebook. In conclusion, we could simply not do the things that we do Without the positive relationship and support of the City of Amarillo employees, you council members, and Mayor Ginger Nelson, thank you for all that you do for us.
Thank you, Ms. Traves. And Mayor, that concludes our public address.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll move on then to agenda item 1A. Is there anything in your packet, council, that you needed more information or had questions about from the get-go?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Item 1B is to discuss a solid waste update. Mr. City Manager.
Well, Mayor, we've got Donnie Hooper, Director of Public Works, to give us this item. As a reminder, this item is going to be continue to be on the council's agenda every single council meeting until we move back to twice-a-week pickups for the entire town.
Which is why we can start calling Donnie Front Row Donnie. He's just started sitting in the front row, and I think that's great. So, Donnie.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. And, once we get past this, we'll have to get somebody else up here to get the microphone on the podium. But we'll be glad to stay and do that. It's been kind of an enjoyable job. We'll start out with the staffing levels. We're going to talk a little bit today about equipment. That was something that was requested last meeting, so I want to get a little bit deeper into the equipment. We'll spend a little bit less time on staffing, but I do have some good news in this first week that our staffing levels continue to go up. We actually had 7 new positions start this week. Now, 4 of those were apprentice positions, so we actually have them in their roles. They are actually working. We have the schedules completed. They're driving. They're in the training. They're in the books. They're doing all the things that we set out for the apprentices to do. So 4 out of the 7 are apprentices. There are 3 that started this week that have CDLs. So distributing those out, this is what the numbers look like. Again, that needed combination. This is just residential and commercial that we're talking about here. We have a lot of other positions that are CDL and solid waste, but we need 58 to be fully staffed. That puts us residential at 29 after we add 1. We need 42 there to be completely full, and we lost 1 in commercial last week at the very end of the week on Friday. So if you look at our net, though, it's much better than it was previously. So we lost 1. We're putting 1 back in commercial. We have that already in the CDL driver, and then 1 will go to the knuckle boom trucks to help out with the front yard collections operation that we have. So that's why we'll distribute those 3. There's a correction to the number up there in the side loader equipment number that's 35. That should actually be 40. And as you'll see as we go through the presentation, you'll see that number corrected later in the slides. But those numbers change daily in the available fleet. We get a report every day in my office that we evaluate on how many pieces of equipment are down for repairs, what the types of repairs are, and what the expected return to service is. So that number should be 40 instead of 35. We have 5 front loaders available out of 10 that we have available, and I'll talk more in detail about that as we go. So as we start to have our eyes open now to the fact that we're filling those positions, it's really putting it on the front page for us that we really have some equipment issues that we got to get taken care of. So next slide shows just where we're at as far as our customer complaints. We've been tracking this since the very beginning. There's a dotted red line that runs up and down the left side of the page there. That's right about the time that we started once-a-week collection. You can see in residential last week we continued the trend of doing a pretty good job as far as the complaints that we were receiving, down to 22 this week. Commercial collections was at 39 and doing a good job there. Now we'll probably see those numbers go up in the next 2 weeks in commercial because we did see a loss of equipment over the past 2 weeks or over the past week, and you'll be seeing that as we move forward as well. Next slide is just our weekly truck availability. I want to show you what we track as far as equipment is concerned. This is just our front load commercial trucks. Those are the larger trucks that you see that pick up the large 8-yard commercial containers. They pick them up from the front. It comes up over the front of the cab to dump. We are now sitting at 4 as of today. We have 10 of those on the fleet. There's 1 of those that is not available for use because it is not repairable. And I know that Glenn Lavender, our fleet superintendent, is watching this presentation now, and him and I discussed the numbers deeply on a daily basis pretty much, and they're doing everything they can to get as much of that equipment back out and in service as soon as possible. But what you see there, if you look at the trend across there and needing 10 to be fully staffed, we've never really come close to that mark since we started once-a-week collection. So that's why we're entertaining the contracts and going down the road for those. And by the way, we're still working with 2 of the commercial collectors and getting some contracts finalized with them. I know the legal office is reviewing those contracts as we speak. Next slide would be about our weekly availability of side loaders. So we have a total of 49 side loaders. There are 6 of those that are dedicated to commercial collections because not all the commercial containers are front-load containers. Some of them are the same things that you see in an alley, the 3-yard dumpsters. We have 43 that are dedicated to residential. And as you look at the chart of availability of that fleet as we've gone through this, we started out with 35 back in July, and it pretty much stays around that 35, 36 mark. There was a couple of times that we got up to 40, and only one time that we've been past 40 at 44. So what you have to do when you look at the math of this, if we go back to twice a week collections, when we go back to twice a week collections, we're going to have 60 routes a day that we would be running instead of is that right, or am I at 30? 30 per day, I'm sorry. Right now we're doing 15 at once a week, and then we'd be doing 30 a day. So you would have to have at least 30 trucks. We'd like to have 32 to make that work. And then if you take the 6 away from the totals that we have here, you see that we're really close to that mark right now. So we're working on making sure that we have that equipment available. What happens during the morning is when we usually see some problems with these trucks. So we can just barely get into a day. We may lose 3 or 4. So we've got to make sure that we've got a little bit of a cushion there to be able to hit that mark. Otherwise, we have 3 or 4 open routes to start a day, and it just puts us behind as we go forward. So we're watching those numbers very closely. Equipment repairs, this is just the kind of a rundown of where we're at as far as repairs are concerned. Our front loaders, we expect to have 2 of those back in service later this week. There's one that's totaled that I mentioned. We expect to have 1 in service next week, and then 2 that will return to service in December. Now with that, we can't predict how many are going to go down between now and then. So there's that fluctuating number that we see. We get in a good spot and we think, all right, we've got 8 again, and then we go back down to 5, and then we go to 8. It's a very rugged environment that they're working in, and those pieces of equipment have a lot of moving parts to them. And it's not something that's just the city of Amarillo. This is industry-wide that people have a lot of maintenance issues with trash trucks just due to that environment. Our side loaders, we do expect to have 7 of those return to service in the next 2 weeks. So that's really going to help with our residential collections for sure. And then we have one side loader that will be in December, and then we have one that exceeds its value for repairs. It has an engine, I believe, and a transmission both out in it, and it's probably the oldest, the oldest truck that we have. So the cost of repairs overtakes what that thing's value is. So we're not going to be repairing it. As far as equipment scheduled delivery, these are the orders that we placed. We have 7 side loaders that are on order. They are expected to be not only delivered but prepared. Once we receive those, we have to go through a preparation process to get them ready. Glenn thinks they'll be ready to hit the streets in March of 23. We have 1 ASL cart truck. That's the trucks that pick up the poly carts. That'll be delivered in March of 23. We have 2 front loaders to be delivered in April of 23. Then the 3 most recent side loaders that we ordered will be December, over a year away, December of 23 when they arrive here. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we go through in our fleet services as well, they have 11 positions that are dedicated to what they call a Fleet Mechanic 2. That is the same people that would work on these trash trucks. They would also work on the other 1,000 pieces of equipment that we have at the City of Amarillo. So they have a large responsibility. We have 5 of those positions filled, and we've stayed at around 4 or 5 in that during this time period. And just like we've done with the trash truck drivers and the other CDL wage increases, we've been working with HR on that. There is a wage adjustment that's in the works right now for those Mechanic 2 positions to get those positions filled as well, because it's just as important as it is the driver positions. If we don't have mechanics to work on them, the turnaround time is a lot longer for this to get them out of the shop. We do have some of those that are farmed out. They're going out to locations that work on trucks, but the turnaround time at those locations is a little bit slow at sometimes too, because they have so much work to do, and the supply chain factors into that as well. We have some parts that we have to wait on literally for 60 days before we get it in. It may just be something that's hydraulically of use of in a trash truck for the compactor unit on it or something like that, but sometimes we see 60 days just to get one of those parts in. We're trying to order those in advance and have them in stock so that we can use those. One of the things that we're doing moving forward is we're really looking now at the technology phase. We're digging deep into technology because we've realized, and there have been so many positive things that have come out of this trail that we've gone down since July. and researching multiple avenues for technology that will stay focused on our efficiencies, both internally and providing customer service. I mean, that's what we want to do. That's the bottom line, is to provide good customer service is what we're doing. Regardless of how many times we're picking it up, we want to provide good customer service. So we're researching technology that's going to improve the overall data availability, not only for us as drivers and managers, but also for the citizens, dashboards that citizens can look at, things like that that will really improve our service delivery. We're working with industry leaders to find those solutions. One of the companies that we're looking at now is called Rubicon Smart City Solid Waste Solutions. They have an incredible package that deals exactly with this topic that we're talking about. And we're going to be starting a pilot on that. We're also looking at a company called NordSense, and I brought that up to you recently at the last council meeting. To talk, it's the pucks that go inside of the dumpster that calculate the capacity and how much actual waste is inside of that dumpster. So what we've done is we have got one of the best working for us. It's Melissa Ashurst, and she's here today, and she's going to come and talk through a little bit about the Rubicon experience and how she found them and what they will provide to us in this 90-day pilot that we're going to run for them. So she's the founder and CEO of Impact Broadband, a longtime partner of ours, and working mainly with IT. And that's the cool thing about it to me, is that she's been working with Rich and that team for a long time, and now they've transitioned that over to say, hey, you need some solutions in solid waste, let me see what I can find. And she went to work and started swinging the bat at these conferences and things that she's at, and she's found some pretty incredible items. So, Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Donnie. Hello, everyone. As you've learned over the past couple of years, I love a good challenge. So it was my pleasure to engage with Donnie and Alan on really identifying the challenges that you all have been so focused on since June. So luckily for the city of Amarillo, other countries have been dealing with these types of issues for decades. And because of that, there are several technology companies across the globe that have really put together a number of solutions to help address these needs. Over the past couple of months, I have spent a lot of time focusing on specifically what Amarillo's concerns are, the unique challenges that you all have, and then interviewing various companies to try to figure out who the right partners are to bring to the table. So the first one that we have found is actually Rubicon. They have been around for a while. Again, they really made their progress in Europe, but have come to market with 80 community deployments across the United States. They also do work with private waste management companies as well. Their entire focus is on improving communities by eliminating solid waste. And in doing so, they are also a certified B Corporation, so they're very transparent about everything they're doing. They've provided countless case studies, access to other community leaders for us to talk to and verify the results of their services. The first one that we wanted to talk about was Harrisonburg, Virginia. This one really had a lot of similarities with the challenges that we've had here in Amarillo. Their management team was really looking to find more efficient, cost-effective waste services. It, I think, is a lot of the same challenges that Donnie's team had, where there's just inconsistency and there's not real data to identify and understand what is a citizen's issue, what's a waste management issue, and it's resulted in, maybe inefficiencies in administration and how the city is addressing waste management. So specifically in this case, they teamed up with Rubicon. They put together 20 driver routes to identify how their current trash routes are going, and then they actually installed their technology, which is a camera that goes on the front of the waste management vehicle, and then an actual phone that's given to the driver. During the entire route, there's any number of data points that are collected to identify things as a citizen hasn't put their trash out. So that if Donnie's team gets a call saying that their trash wasn't picked up, there's a photo that shows shows that, no, the trash cans weren't there. So there's shared accountability throughout the community and ensuring that we're being respectful of the resources that the city does have available. You can see that their efficiency was pretty incredible. Not only were they able to address a lot of their customer service issues, which I thought was great, they also reduced their miles and their minutes per route. So they identified additional cost savings beyond anything that they were hoping to see. I know that when Donnie and Alan and I were speaking, we think that there's even additional data points that they're missing when they're calculating the cost savings and efficiencies that are being driven and collected through these applications. Here in Texas, they've been working with Denton, Texas for a couple of years now, and they've seen, again, substantial cost savings. They were looking to really come out with routing solutions to help optimize their operations. Their challenges were similar to Donnie's. They had inconsistencies with number of employees. They were having issues with trucks going down consistently and inability to anticipate, I think was the word you used, when that was going to happen. And Rubicon was able to not only optimize their trash collection, but also they have an additional component that can actually collect all of the engine codes so that they can better understand and identify when a vehicle is going to experience issues and start planning. So the whole key around all of this smart city technology is about using data to anticipate the citizen's needs versus reacting to a citizen's complaint. So when we have real data, we're able to be far more efficient in how we deliver city services. It also allows Donnie's team to be more focused on understanding and reading the data versus spending cycles in collecting and reviewing data. This is a little bit, I know this is hard for everybody to see, but this is specifically about what the technology looks like. You can see the camera beacon, you can see the phone. One of the challenges that Donnie's team had experienced here in Amarillo, specifically with residential, was finding an application that would take into account alleyways. And this is the only partner we have been able to find that actually has the capability to merge the city's GSI files, which have been paid for to outline all of those alleyways, and combine it with Google so that they get the route guide by guide that's necessary. So we are really excited. This partner seems like one who has a true commitment to working with communities. Again, they're doing this for no cost for the first 3 months. And from every community that I've spoken to personally, they've seen anywhere from $200,000 to $1 million in cost efficiencies. So with that, questions? I don't know if that's for me or for Donnie, but do you have any questions?
Questions, council? Melissa, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing to help Donnie. We have a tremendous amount of trust in Donnie and his staff and how hard they're working on this project. But Councilmember Smith, did you have a question?
No, it just sounds like a smart way to do things.
It is. It's nice when you have data to help you make real decisions.
Great.
Yeah.
Councilmember Smith is what was he's our driver on this.
I know. He's my biggest technology supporter. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. He is. He is. So.
All right.
Okay. Thank you,
all.
Melissa. Any questions for Donnie, council? Donnie, we appreciate the update and the work that you and Alan are leading, so keep it up.
I do have one question. You had 13 vehicles listed. Are they all budgeted?
Yes.
When they come?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thanks.
Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donnie. I had skipped over an announcement about Andrew Freeman, so Mr. City Manager.
All right, Andrew, if you'd just go ahead and come on up to the front. I want to share some information. Anytime we have noteworthy, go less up to the front. Anytime we have noteworthy achievements, promotions, things like that, I like to bring that to council's attention. So this is in keeping with that. Andrew has recently been designated as a International City Management Association credentialed manager. It's a big deal. Just to illustrate how big of a deal it is, with over 2,000 cities in Texas, there's only 119 ICMA credentialed managers in the state. So that includes not just credentialed city managers, but also candidates. So there's only 119. This is a big deal. ICMA, in order to be qualified to be an ICMA certified manager, there's a lot of things you have to do. Adhere to the code of ethics. In this case, Texas City Management Association and ICMA use the same code of ethics. Andrew's on the ethics committee for the Texas City Management Association and works actively in that role, and is only one of 2 certified ethics instructors for the entire Panhandle. So doing a great work on the ethics side as far as being a example and also a teacher on how we uphold the highest ethical standards. In addition to that, you have to have been shown demonstrated progress in the management field over the last 5 years, have experience with staff management, financial management excellence, policy facilitation, implementation, assisting counsel with policy creation, and then also service delivery. Educational standards are also there. Andrew has a master's in public administration, along with a lot of other certifications. So he's carrying out the highest standards of city management, and that's recognized by the International City Management Association, giving him the I would say, rare and coveted credentialed manager status and designation. So if you have any questions for Andrew or just kudos, I want to add mine to whatever you might say or think. In that I'm very proud of what he's been able to do and the dedication to continued education and continued certifications.
Just want to say thank you, Andrew, and appreciate the work that you and your team do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate you choosing to come to Amarillo.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Has it been 5 years, Andrew?
Be 6 years in April.
Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah, I remember meeting Andrew in the parking lot at Polk Street United Methodist Church for, I can't remember what the meeting was.
It was an AEDC meeting, the Economic Strategic Plan, yes.
And you could tell even at that point in time that he would be a young man that's really going to make some moves. And so I'm really proud of you, Andrew, and thank you for being here.
I do think you exemplify, Andrew, that once you've made a lot of moves. How many different positions have you been in since you've been here?
At least 4.
3, 4? So every one of those moves was something you were striving for, and I appreciate that example. The culture that you have here at City Hall and city staff is that, yeah, you can accomplish this, but that doesn't mean you're content or satisfied with that. And I think this is just one more notch in that stick for you, that you're always pushing yourself to do more and to be better trained and to have better opportunities, that you bring a lot of value to this team. So I appreciate the work that you do for the city, but also the work that you continue doing to make yourself a better team player.
Thank you.
And I think Jared does a good job of creating that culture here at City Hall. So
absolutely. And
appreciate your leadership too, Jared.
Thank you to council and city management just for support to do the continuing education and continue to be up to speed on all the new information out there.
Yeah, it's important. We appreciate the work you put into it. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is item 1C, discuss the city plan kickoff presentation by MIG.
We've got Emily Culler, Assistant Director of Planning, to introduce the topic and bring on our guests from MIG, who a number of council members and also city staff have sat in on preliminary meetings earlier today. So, Emily.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are in the middle of our first round of engagement meetings for City Plan. We've been calling this a soft launch before the official community kickoff in January. So far, we've introduced the plan and the process to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the newly formed steering committee. Last night, we've held several listening sessions, and I know some of you attended those, so thank you. And those sessions were intended to reach people who've been closely involved with the PDP process, Partnership for Development Progress, and the Zoning Code Revision Project. And we have our consultant team, MIG. So I just would like to introduce them. Jay Rankins is our principal in charge. And then we have Kristen Ramirez, our project manager, here today to present. They may look familiar to you because they're also, MIG is also the group that completed our Parks Master Plan, which we're proud of, and we're happy to have their expertise on this project as well.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Council. Wanted to run through this presentation relatively quickly and allow any time for question and answer. I know you have a full agenda, though, so I will try to keep it short and sweet. Our project team, really quickly, again, I'm Jay Rankins, the principal with MIG. MIG is a planning and design firm. We have planning, landscape architecture, urban design, civil engineering, community engagement, and a host of other things that we can tap into within this process depending on the priorities of the community. We are joined by 3 partner firms. Walter P. Moore, we're working primarily with their Dallas office. They'll be focused on transportation, parking, and infrastructure. EPS, or Economic and Planning Systems, they will be focused on market research, housing and economic development policy, as well as fiscal impact analysis. And Clarion Associates, which is another firm that actually does comprehensive planning as well, that we decided about 5 years ago that instead of competing on every project that we would join forces on some of these. They're particularly good at the policy side of things, whereas I think we are strongest in the engagement, land use planning, and kind of built form aspects of the project. On the screen there, you can also see a couple of our other project associates. We'll be tapping into those folks as well as others within our firm as we move through this process. I mentioned the different roles on the project in addition to some of the expertise areas that I already mentioned. We'll be providing overall project management, leading the vision, goals, and guiding principle development, facilitation, and community engagement, as well as I mentioned, land use and urban design, but also carrying forward some of those recommendations from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that we led. And then I think the others we hit sufficiently on that previous slide. So city plan overview, we have a couple different ways we wanted to talk about it. First is through the process and the engagement. We are, in fact, really early in the process. We've been working with staff over the course of the last 6 to 8 weeks and sort of beginning to lay that groundwork, establish the baseline, begin to look at previous plans and efforts, understand some of the current conversations happening around the community. And we're doing this soft launch, so to speak, as Emily mentioned. But that's really to gear us up to provide or have some work done when we engage with the community. So in terms of having that established baseline with an existing conditions report, we'll begin that conversation in January with the community. And then we're actually anticipating about a year-long process from that point forward. So ideally having a draft plan late 2023 with adoption either at the end of this coming year or early in 2024. Breaking that down a little bit further, we have a kickoff, vision, goals, and guiding principles as the first step. That really sort of leading the way to looking at existing conditions and the guiding principles. Not all plans, comprehensive plans, as the city plan, Vision 2045 is, include guiding principles. We think that's pretty important, though, in terms of thinking about metrics that we can use to evaluate recommendations. I'm going to speak to scenarios here in a moment, so the opportunity to evaluate those as well as set measurable metrics and that we can use to track plan progress after adoption. So are we implementing the plan effectively? Those guiding principles will help in doing so. Then looking at plan elements and recommendations in a comprehensive plan. This is both in, as it is defined by the state of Texas as well as most states throughout the country. There are a set of plan elements and topics that are addressed in a comprehensive plan. So we can look to the 2010 plan, the update in 2016, as examples of those, such as land use, thinking about transportation and mobility, housing, economic development, infrastructure, community services and facilities, so on and so forth. So we'll look at each of those. A lot of times the plan is organized by those elements, and those will actually be the chapters or sections. A trend in comprehensive planning is actually to look at themes within the community through that conversation and grouping some of those elements so that you're not siloing those topics and you're actually beginning to connect some of those dots in a more effective way. So we'll navigate that process with you all and with staff and with the community to see what is most fitting here. Implementation strategies will be key, and then drafting and finalizing the plan itself. Engagement, these are just a few highlights. We're actually working on the details of an engagement plan. Part of our kind of fact-finding in this soft launch visit is understanding some of the nuances of who are typically engaged, who are not typically engaged in the community, whether that's geographically or demographically, and thinking about how do we fine-tune that engagement strategy to have effective communication, education, engagement, and a feedback loop so that we can really ensure the community that what they're saying is going to be reflected in the policy direction as well as the maps and other recommendations within the plan. So we'll have a series of small group and stakeholder engagements, including the steering committee, engagements with you all. I'll elaborate on both of those in just a second. We have biweekly project team meetings, community-wide engagement. We'll be doing intercepts and pop-ups, community meetings more traditionally. Going to where people are, we would interpret that as going to different events, different meetings that are happening, whether those be organized neighborhood groups or otherwise. Community surveys will be a part of that, and then obviously trying to get the word out in whatever effective ways we can. We know that mailers will likely be a piece of that, the website, and social media. The steering committee, we're really asking them to tackle a few different things. One is to help digest the community input. We work on comprehensive plans and different types of plans all over Texas and around the country, but we want to make sure that we're getting it right. And so the steering committee is going to be really instrumental in sort of digesting all of the volume of information that we're going to be receiving through all those different modalities that I showed on the previous slide. We then want to make sure that we're getting feedback on the drafts and the deliverables as well as on the process itself. So the steering committee will be helping to fine-tune things a bit, making sure we're sort of framing things correctly prior to going to the community, as well as I mentioned, the first bullet, processing the information we get once we have talked with the broader community. And then finally, we want to make sure that the overall plan is reflecting the community's direction. We're going to have a series of meetings with the steering committee, probably 8 or 9 in total, but covering 7 topics. A couple of these are meaty enough that they'll require multiple meetings. But going all the way from our orientation meeting, which we had yesterday, all the way through implementation and the draft plan. With you all, we're going to be doing a series of work sessions, at least 3 key milestones in the process after orientation here. So 3 more would be the best way to say it. So once we have community input on vision, goals, and guiding principles, we want to come to you all and to planning and zoning with those as we're developing the plan element recommendations, and then obviously as we're beginning to craft the plan itself. And that would be prior to briefings and or hearings, briefings, and associated with adoption. So the role of city plan, I've referred to it many times already without defining it. Apologies there. But it is, in fact, an update to the city's comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plans are defined by the state of Texas, and I said a lot of other states adopt a similar planning program for their states, but it is intended to be a long-range look at how the city grows, evolves, and invests. So that has to do with thinking about how do we balance equitable growth across the community, especially in light of some of the conversations that have happened recently with the neighborhood planning initiatives, with the PDP, other such efforts. Thinking about quality of life improvements and thinking about how do we guide public and private investments in the most effective way. Thinking about then where these different pieces go. So thinking about land use in that respect, but also amenities. When we think about quality of life and the way that we interact with our communities, and tackling all those topics towards the bottom of the screen there. I mentioned quality of life already, but economic development, housing, neighborhoods, transportation, health and safety, and growth management. Zoning code revisions. We know that there's been a lot of discussion, particularly this year, with the anticipated update to the zoning code that stalled out. Typically in a comprehensive plan, upon sort of the on the heels of its adoption, one of the first steps is to revisit the zoning code, whether that be sort of minor updates or a larger rewrite of the zoning code. Obviously, that didn't happen immediately after the 2010 plan adoption of the existing comprehensive plan. So I think in part because of that time lapse, in part because of COVID, there were some process concerns that the community expressed, particularly that they were surprised by some of the things that were being addressed in there, didn't feel like they were fully able to engage in that process. And so our understanding, although we were not involved in that effort, is that the pause button has been pushed, but with our timeline wrapping up hopefully by the end of 2023 or very early 2024, that code update can actually progress on the heels of this effort, providing that overall vision, aligning our different planning efforts, pointing the community in the same direction. And in fact, there were some questions by the steering committee, well, what does that kind of mean for that code update? I would anticipate that while, I suppose there's a scenario in which none of that work is used, what I would anticipate is a lot of that work is used, and so it'll be tweaks, and it actually gives you a pretty good jump start on the code update, which normally would take 3 to 4 years in a lot of communities. So hopefully that can happen in a much more expedient fashion. The other thing that we wanted to mention was the PDP, the Partnership for Development Progress. We're actually viewing that as an input into this process. It does a lot around process, around the allocation of resources and responsibilities when it comes to development. But what the comprehensive plan can do is advance that further in thinking about differentiation across the community in terms of what we want to see. And PDP obviously giving us a jump start on the how we achieve what we'd like to see. So the PDP, other plans and studies feeding into this, one of the things that I think has resonated in some of our presentations over the last couple of days is thinking about all the other plans that exist, whether those be our utility plans, transportation planning, parks and recreation plan. And this is our chance to look at all of those and in most cases feed into this process and look at them all in concert. They were developed in isolation, individual kind of discussions, maybe some overlap amongst the stakeholders, but a lot of times different people working on different plans. And so this actually allows the departments, community members who engaged in those, as well as a new audience, to look at how do they align, how might they misalign, where there are gaps in those processes, and making sure that we're pointing in the same direction in all cases. That feeds into the vision and goals, the guiding principles, as I mentioned, and then 5 kind of key topic areas that we're using to guide the plan element work. So the first being land use and community character. We want to make sure that existing land use, that future land use that will be updated with the comprehensive plan, ultimately the zoning code and the community's vision are all in alignment. We also want to think about character, defining features, and how is character defined in different areas of the community, and what are those key elements that we may want to codify in a plan like this. Growth management and capacity, we'll actually be working with the state demographers' projections for the community in terms of population, translating those to housing units and jobs, and then working with the community to understand different trade-offs, different strategies to influence not the number so much, but the types of housing that may be needed depending on the demographic trends and how we might shape that, as well as employment and the industries that we may be growing within. And so those will then be used to inform alternative growth scenarios that will ultimately then be translated to the new future land use map. Throughout that process, we'll be using the guiding principles established by the community, as well as a fiscal impact analysis to understand what the implications for the city in terms of cost associated with different growth scenarios and development patterns. Housing neighborhoods, really looking at how do we enhance and improve existing neighborhoods and ensure that new neighborhoods are of a quality that we can be proud of. Looking at amenity-based neighborhoods, kind of learning from how Amarillo and a lot of communities started, which was putting housing and organizing that around community amenities like schools and parks, churches, places that we want to gather and go socialize with each other. Parks and cultural resources, building on the the master plan that was recently adopted, but also looking at additional partners when it comes to that, and really looking at historic and cultural assets. How do we integrate those into the plan in different elements, as well as their own sections, to ensure that this is truly a plan that's of and for Amarillo, and not just simply, a plan that you could grab from someplace else and do a find and replace with the different names. And then finally, community mobility and infrastructure, working with the city, working with the MPO, working with TxDOT, potentially depending on where the community wants to take things, and looking at transportation, all the different ways that we get around, relating that very closely to land use as well, and making sure that those are syncing up, as well as planning for the growth and ensuring that we have infrastructure in place, both in terms of transportation as well as delivery of services to accommodate the growth that we anticipate and target in different areas. All of that would be for naught if we didn't think about implementation. And so when we get to the implementation steps, we'll be teeing up several follow-on items, such as I mentioned already, the update to the zoning code. The zoning map would be a piece of that. There's also all those inputs of different system plans, the water plan, the transportation plan, parks and recreation plan. Depending on where the community wants to take things, again, we wouldn't anticipate a big deviation, but there could be updates necessary to make sure that those are in alignment with the comprehensive plan, so we'll identify those. Looking at informing the CIP projects and priorities, we had a really great interdepartmental meeting today. A lot of times we run into a comprehensive plan, or any plan for that matter, but especially the comprehensive plan, being sort of viewed as the planning department's document. And we found a lot of, I think enthusiasm, and I think vocalized sort of buy-in this morning that the departments across the city really want to engage in this process and make sure that it's something that they can use in their day-to-day as well. Again, as kind of that guiding star, making sure that the community is pointing in the same direction. And then finally, and this isn't a guarantee, but beginning to identify public-private partnerships, because obviously the city cannot implement a vision for the community on its own. There's a lot of players on the private sector. I should probably say public-private nonprofit entities as well. So our next steps, we'll be working on that existing conditions analysis. We've actually been discussing different ways to kind of reflect what we've heard over the last couple of days, some of the big questions people are asking, providing data in a way that's really usable for people to inform the work ahead. We'll be launching a project website in December. We'll be kicking off that community engagement, community-wide engagement in January. In the first quarter, two things will be happening simultaneously. One will be, as we're collecting that input from the community, providing or beginning to develop the draft vision and goals. But sort of behind the scenes for kind of rollout on the heels of the vision and goals to the broader community will be the development of a business as usual scenario. So as we're developing alternative growth scenarios, we want to compare that to something. And so that will be looking at existing policy, existing trends in development, and taking our best guess at where that would take us in 2045. And that will provide a good comparison as we look at alternatives to that, see how much we may or may not want to deviate from business as usual. And with that, I would love to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, Council? Wow, Jay. I think you did a great job.
Covered it all.
I think most of us have already heard that presentation, too. So,
yeah, and I thank you for enduring it once again.
Yeah, no, it's good, and we appreciate it. This is an important project. It's a lot of work. So we appreciate that you guys are here to help guide us, and we really appreciate our planning committee, our steering committee, that's going to give their time to drive this process. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Emily, anything to
Thank you
add?
all.
Kristen, anything to add? Okay. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is item 1D, which is to discuss upcoming debt issuances. Mr. City Manager.
All right, Mayor, we wanted to go ahead and give an overview of all the debt issuances projected through this year, both budgeted and not budgeted, and give council a chance to answer any questions. We're going to be talking about not just the two that are on the agenda for approval of posting notice today, that is the PIDs and the landfill expansion, but also water and sewer and drainage enhancements along with the Major League Baseball required MPEV enhancements to Hodgetown. So, Laura, we also have Stephen Adams here, outside counsel, to assist or
financial advisor.
Financial advisor,
yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
Yep.
Don't want to make him sound like a lawyer. Either I don't want to give him too much credit, or don't want to. I'll stop now.
Back up, Jared.
Yeah.
And
Danger.
we'll stop right there.
Danger. But Laura, take it away.
Okay, so I'll just briefly introduce this. So we're talking about upcoming proposed debt issuances. These were all discussed and included in the budget that went into effect October 1st of this year. There was one exception to that. We are looking to potentially issue some additional hotel occupancy tax bonds due to some changes in the requirements by the Major League Baseball Association to our facility. And to stay in compliance, there are some required changes, and that is nationwide. It's not just here in Amarillo. These are updated standards that we must come into compliance with. And so that's the only one that was not included in budget for this year. We're going to go over that in a little more detail. If there's specific questions about what that project might look like, I've got Jerry Danforth here. Otherwise, we've got water and sewer revenue bonds to cover several projects that were discussed during budget, along with drainage, utility revenue bonds, and then one certificates of obligation that is combined for landfill, Colonies Public Improvement District, and the Heritage Hills Public Improvement District. That is the only item we have an action item on the agenda for. The rest of these are just discussion presentation. We'll be bringing it back in January for next steps. And so I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Adams, and I'm here to certainly answer questions if needed.
Okay, just waiting on a presentation real quick.
There you go. There it is.
Missing part of it. All right, so there are three bond issues that we're discussing. We are planning on selling these at the January 10th meeting. And for the water and sewer revenue bonds and the drainage utility bonds, we plan on taking bids that morning, along with the certificates of obligation, which we'll talk about at an agenda item later. The hotel occupancy tax bonds will be negotiated the day before, and we'll bring that offer on the same day on the 10th. So the water and sewer revenue bonds are the project fund deposit is $46,500,000. We plan on selling 20-year debt with a 10-year call. The city's already, the rate increases to pay these bonds have already been put into effect. And what we have on here is the blue is the anticipated debt service associated with the bonds to be sold in January. The gray, that is debt by the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority that Amarillo is responsible for. The green is both existing revenue bonds and some certificates of obligation which were sold, which are supported by the water utility that were sold to the Texas Water Development Board to meet their requirements at a 0% interest rate. So we did comply with their requirements to hit that. And you can see the red line above is your projected net revenues with your rate increase based on 2021. You still have significant coverage, and you can see beginning in 27, your debt service falls off, so you have a lot of capacity for future projects. This is the debt service on that. The total, the $46,500,000 will be the construction fund deposit. We will probably receive a net premium on the bid to cover the cost of issuance, and it's level debt service between 2023 and 2043, approximately $3.78 million per year. So on the timing on that one, we're going to take bids on that one at 10 in the morning, competitive sale, and award that afternoon. We'll come back with the City Council that afternoon for that one. And we will close on February the 16th if all goes as planned. For the hotel occupancy tax bonds, as Laura discussed, This is for improvements to comply with Major League Baseball requirements. We ran numbers here with the construction fund deposit of $3.5 million. We believe that's a maximum. I think there's some funds available that from other sources from the team that will possibly reduce this amount, and this will be paid for from both hotel occupancy tax revenues and lease revenues from the team, combination thereof. And we'll have a final amount probably lower than this, but if we do issue this, it should be 20 years with a 10-year call. And on this one, you can see your hotel occupancy tax revenues are significantly higher, the pledged revenues, than the debt service, which includes all your outstanding hotel occupancy tax bonds. These will be taxable because they benefit a non-governmental entity, which is the baseball team. And because of that, and because of the hotel occupancy tax pledge, we can't really competitively bid these, so we will negotiate them with underwriters. So the debt service for this total amount would be about $375,000 a year. Right now, we have a cash reserve fund included in here, plus cost of issuance. We are going to evaluate buying an insurance policy instead of putting in the $380,000 in cash, if that is available, and that should reduce the size as well. So on this one, we're going to negotiate it the day before the council meeting, and then bring the results of that negotiation to the council meeting on the 10th, and also close on February the 16th. The third one that we are discussing here is for drainage utility bonds, and we expect the bonds to have a project fund amount of $5 million for improvements, capital improvements to the drainage utility system. This is repaid with drainage fee revenues, which have also went into effect of October 2022, so those monies are in the budget and available to pay this debt service. Again, selling on January the 16th and closing on February the 16th. The debt service, again, on this is far below your net revenues. Use most of this money to pay for just ongoing capital improvements of this system. And the sources and uses of funds on this one, again, $5 million. Expect to get a premium for that to pay for the cost of issuance. And the timing, we'll take bids on this at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm sorry, we're going to take bids on this at 10 a.m., so we'll have bids at 9, 9:30, and 10 for the 3 different bond issues, including the COs, to bring to the council meeting on January the 10th. And then just kind of for information where interest rates have been, you can see on the right they have come up since they went really, really down low during COVID when there was so much money put into the system, liquidity put into the system to help out with getting us through COVID, but they're still on a relative basis very low, so should be hopefully a decent time to sell bonds in January. Be glad to answer any questions that you may have on any of these.
Explain the 10-year redemption to me.
Almost every bond issue is sold with the issuer's right or this council's right to call and refund those bonds in 10 years. So if interest rates go down at that time, or you want to restructure the debt, you have the right at that point to refund the bonds. The bondholders want 10 years of interest earnings to get you the lowest interest rates, and that's pretty standard in the industry.
So we couldn't do it before that?
You could. You would pay a higher interest rate.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions for Laura, council?
I've got one. You mentioned that Jerry Danforth might come and explain what we're doing to the ballpark.
Sure. Yep. We'll have Jerry come give you a little more information on that.
Thanks. Mayor, Council, what we're looking at on the ball field, MLB changed 2 years ago. It used to be there was a minor league and the major league. The major league did not control the minor league at that time. They had recommendations and standards that they had to meet. That changed. Now Major League Baseball controls the minor league fields. When they did that, they changed the standards that they had for their fields. Fortunately, we're one of the few that falls in the category that we're not looking at a major impact. I can say that there's several fields within the Texas League that our team plays against that are looking at potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of difference to do that work to meet those standards. Some of the standards, just as a point of reference to think about, Major League Baseball is looking at more women being involved in Major League Baseball, from the coaching to the training to the umpires. We have to provide locker facilities for them that would meet those standards. Currently, we don't meet those standards because of the way that we're built. All of that function happens actually below grade at the Hodgetown right now, so we have to make some adjustments to those areas. Making those adjustments, we have enough square footage to accomplish those tasks, but once we do that, we consume areas that some of the retail components that the team has to do to function will be kicked out of those areas, so we have to build another area that would be able to accommodate that sort of stuff. So we're looking at some additional stuff that would take place there that would potentially increase the revenue for the team as we go forward, and increase the function and flexibility of the field.
Thank you.
Total cost around $4 million?
We're thinking we can do it for $3.5 million with around $500,000 for A&E.
What's the contract arrangement between the ball team and the city for the hot tax share?
I would have to let Laura answer that.
Okay.
Doesn't get any hot tax.
Is that a percentage or is that a dollar?
No. So all the hot tax comes to the city of Amarillo, and so the city utilizes those funds as needed to pay back the debt that's outstanding.
So let me rephrase that
Sure.
question. I said it incorrectly. So what is the share of improvements between the ball team and the city of Amarillo?
So there is the ball field, as you know, is actually an asset by the city of Amarillo that they're leasing. They're part of the lease agreement states that they will pay an annual amount, that a portion of it goes to help fund the debt service associated with the field, the existing field, and then another portion of it, which I believe is around $225,000, goes into a capital improvement and reserve account. And it's one that the city holds we hold it in our name, but it is a negotiation between the ball team and the city of Amarillo of when to utilize those funds to either conduct repairs or improvements at the ball field. So part of those dollars we're looking to utilize to pay for some of these, for the annual debt service on these improvements. Not all of it, because we certainly want to make sure that there's still funds available if there's an unexpected repair that comes up or something that needs to be utilized. That's what those dollars are sitting there for. And so we don't want to use every last penny. We want to make sure there's still some for unexpected things that might come up.
To recap that, did you say $225,000 per year?
Yes, is what goes into this capital improvement and reserve account. Yes, sir.
And have we used any of that money yet?
We've used some. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we have utilized some, and Jerry might remember some of those. I think we maybe purchased some awnings and did some plumbing repairs, I believe. So a couple of things that have come up, but there are funds sitting in that account right now, and that's part of what we're going to work through on a negotiation with them to potentially use some cash to pay down this. That's why in the presentation it says the debt issuance will be up to $3.5 million, but we're expecting it to be lower. We just kind of need to work out with them how much we're all comfortable with pulling out of that account to pay for in cash up front.
Okay, so to clarify, it is a negotiated amount. It is not contractual.
That is correct.
Already spelled out for a percentage or a dollar figure.
That is correct. It's going to be a contract negotiation.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Laura. Stephen, we appreciate your being here. Okay, item 1E, do we have anything that we need to discuss about as a possible future agenda item or a request from the city manager? Councilmember Smith?
I'd like to ask, meeting before last or sometime we had a letter from a mayor in Ukraine wanting us to be a sister city. And I found out later that we had a sister city, but it went back 20 years or so. I don't know anything about that.
Mexico.
Mexico. I'd like to see an item on the agenda to get a report on that, the Mexico sister city, and then consider whether I'd like this to be an action item. In case we like it, we could move forward. But I want to know what the obligations would be for us and for Dnipro, Ukraine.
Okay, good. We'll get you some information on that for sure.
Mayor, if I could, Sister Cities International, that goes along with that. If I could get, or if we could get an update on what that is and the criteria involved, I think that would be the most helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I had one, Mayor. I would request a discussion with the entire council on panhandling and roadway safety, please.
Okay, let's talk about that. Anybody else? Okay, good. Let's move on then and do the consent agenda. Anything there that needs to come off for further questions or discussion? Hearing nothing, do we have a motion on that?
Yes, Mayor, we do. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. That passes with a 5-0 vote. Let's pause here, council, and take a break before we move into our action item agenda. Let's try to be back in about 5 minutes.
Highly unlikely.
Very unlikely. That's a go.
Okay, we'll go back into session and start with item 3A, which is a public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 8032. Mr. City Manager.
All right, Mayor, we've got Andrew Freeman, Assistant City Manager, to present this item, which is a tax increment reinvestment zone discussion.
Yes, sir. So this has been discussed with previous councils, current council, and the Tiers Board has been discussing this for probably the last 2 or 3 years about an opportunity to extend the current years for the downtown Center City Tiers number 1. So a little bit of a background. It was established first in 2006 with an expiration of 2036. 4 taxing entities contribute their tax rate to the zone. That's the city, Potter County, Amarillo College, and the Water District. All give 100%. It started with a base value of just under $140 million and has grown to $269 million, so a pretty large increase there. The goals of Center City, of course, are hotels, residential, office, commercial, retail, as well as the ballpark and any entertainment venues. And here's a little bit of the progress that has kind of led to seeking a little bit more time to implement these goals. So hotel rooms are only about 37% of the goal that was laid out in the plan. Urban residential is only about 13%. Office commercial is about 19%. 56% if you look at the investment amount. And then retail only square footage is about 28%. So really we've made some progress, and I'm about to show you a couple pictures that shows that progress on an aerial, but there's still a lot more to be done, and it's a really large zone, large boundary. We've seen some improvements really in the core along Buchanan over to Polk, but as far as the periphery, there's just a lot more opportunities that could need that additional time for assistance. Here's a Google aerial from 2006. This was when the zone was established, just so you can get an idea of kind of the before picture. And then this is what it looks like today. So, of course, you can see particularly along Buchanan with the ballpark, the hotel, Excel building, Toot and Totem, Happy State Bank, and then you can even see some of the demolished properties like AIG, and then the new footprint where Amarillo Area Foundation's building their building is taking place. So you get a real idea of what's taking place downtown since this zone was established. As far as additional background, so the Tiers Board looked at many different scenarios. One was, do we look at 20 years, 30 years? Do we look at continuing at the 100% tax rate? Do you reduce that down and only do half of the tax rate instead? And what they kind of settled on as a recommendation is 20 years at 50% of the tax rate, just to allow each taxing entity that has invested their dollars in this zone to at least after 2036 recoup that in their annual budget for their priorities. As far as the tax code that establishes tiers, they do have a way to expand the boundary, to expand the time. That's laid out in Chapter 311.007 of the tax code. Does require notice in the newspaper, which was done, as well as a public hearing today. And then just as an FYI, there is a wide range of terms on these zones across the state. Some are 5 years, some are 50 years. Many have already been amended to extend. Here in Amarillo, we've not extended the time, but we have expanded the boundary of one. That was the East Gateway Tiers. So we've gone through a similar process on another zone. This very difficult to read spreadsheet captures what it looks like projecting out through 2036, just so you get an idea of what that 100% tax rate brings in each year. The current budget brings in about $1.7 million, and then after debt payments and incentive rebates, there's about $605,000 remaining for other expenses, and then by 2036, that would end up around $3.1 million. What we've seen is about a 4.32% growth average between 2007 and 2022, and these projections are very conservative, 2.5%. And then this next slide is the projection for if this was extended another 20 years at half the percentage rate. So you can see there, starting in 2037, it would still be bringing in basically almost what it's bringing in today. The difference being is that in 2036, all those rebates, debt service payments all go away. So the zone would start over in that time frame. Granted, if this was extended, we might get a request to have a rebate through the next 20 years, 2056. So those would be accounted in as far as what it looks like in 2037.
That would be for a future project.
That would be for a
So
future
all of our
project, no
existing
current.
abatements and rebates will get 100% of that value starting in 2037.
Correct.
2037.
2037. So, yes, so that adds to the value. And then you can see on the far right columns, that's the 0.5% participation rate. So we can basically equate that to the city, for example, would be contributing $510,000, but in 2037 would be receiving $510,000. So basically splitting the revenue. County would get $812,000, Amarillo College $280,000, and the Water District $11,000 in this scenario. So as far as the proposal today, the ordinance was drafted to extend tiers number 1 for 20 years with a new expiration of 2056 at the city participation rate of 50% of the tax increment. And then if it's approved, then we would go to each taxing entity to request an amendment to their existing participation agreements to extend the term with the new percentage participation rates. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions about this? Andrew, just for anybody who's watching at home, we go back over one more time, just what is a tiers and why is it such a good tool?
Sure. So
in our city,
a tiers is a tool to basically, you set a baseline for a zone as far as the taxes, say in 2006, we set that baseline. Any investment and growth, development in that zone grows your tax base. That continues to collect taxes, but that is then invested into the zone for infrastructure, encouraging incentives for development to take place, or just general plans for the area. And then at the end of it, you grow all that, and then at the end of the zone, all the entities then will return to collecting that tax revenue base for future projects.
So who has access? In other words, in 2006, we drew the line.
Yes.
So in 2007, whatever new property came online between 2006 and 2007 generated a little bit of new property tax revenue. It's that little bit of revenue that gets pulled aside and the tiers has available income. You've given us a great spreadsheet showing the income. Who can that income be paid out to?
So the tiers board is a 10-member board that controls the recommendations of where that funding goes. It can go towards city projects. It can go to offset developers' expenses for projects if it's meeting the goals of the zone. It could be for grants to pay for streetscape improvements, but ultimately it needs to be benefiting the public within the zone. It can only be spent inside the zone.
And so there are policies and requirements, and all of those are public, and anybody who wants to learn more about it, or anybody who's interested in, if they own property inside the zone and they want to apply for some sort of tiers benefit,
yes,
they can
yes.
find that out.
On our website, we've got all the plans and documents, we've got an application form, and we've got policies and procedures that they can review.
And if they want to cut that short, who would they just call and say, in 10 minutes, you can tell me more than I can learn?
Yeah, they can call me. They can also call the planning department. Cody Balzan is our new economic development specialist. So he's ultimately the one that will take their application, kind of walk them through it and see what qualifies.
I noticed that Cody's doing all of his work lately with one hand tied behind his back, right? Mm-hmm. Right, Cody? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, good. He can do it one-handed.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. At this time, we'll open a public hearing with regard to ordinance number 8032. Anybody who wishes to speak for, on, or against this item may have 3 minutes to do so. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak? Ms. Beth Duke.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. It's a pleasure to come today and to thank you for considering extending the tax increment reinvestment zone. I know a lot of times we talk in acronyms and people don't really understand, but the impact the tier zone has made in our downtown is amazing. I've worked downtown my whole adult life, and the beauty that is coming to downtown through the tiers, the public infrastructure, the pedestrian lights, the incentives for businesses to come downtown. when we were working to get this passed in 2006, Commissioner Madison Scott said, this is one way that downtown can pay for downtown. And it has really made the investment amazing. Before Tiers, there was not a hotel that was willing to build downtown. The idea was if you weren't on Interstate 40, it wasn't going to happen. And through Tiers and historic tax credits and some other things, now we have 3 beautiful hotels downtown. And I'm proud of how far we've come. We're not done yet, and I think extending this would only make it more exciting. When we talk to all the participating taxing entities to get this passed, we said we want to be the first Tiers, but we do not want to be the only Tiers. We think we are leaders in showing how this can work to help a neighborhood. And I'm native. I kind of think a Tiers is sort of like planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree in Amarillo, Texas is today, because it's going to grow and we're going to be planting trees that we may never sit under. But look what a legacy we're leaving. And some of these are generational projects that will keep Amarillo growing for years to come. So thank you for considering this. If you can't tell how proud I am, then give me a call and I'll tell you, because we have come a long way together. I tell everybody we're in the 15th year of a 10-year plan, but that's okay. It doesn't happen overnight. So thank you.
Beth Duke, we all want to say thank you for planting a tree in 2006, because we're all sitting under the shade of it now, and our kids and grandkids and the businesses that are yet to come are benefiting from the work that you and lots of other people did back in 2006. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to speak on this item? Okay, with that, we'll close the hearing and entertain a motion on item 3A.
Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 8032, authorizing a 20-year extension of tax increment reinvestment zone number 1, City of Amarillo, Texas, for tax increment financing purposes pursuant to Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code, which was originally created in 2006 for a 30-year term.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Powell and seconded by Councilmember Smith to approve item 3A, ordinance number
8032.
8032. Thank you, Rita. Any discussion or questions about that item, that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. That item passes with the 5-0 vote. Item 3B is a public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 8033.
All right, Mayor, Andrew's going to answer make most of the presentation, but just in way of introduction, this is a new Tiers that would be considered in the area of 335 and I-27, better known as Hollywood and I-27. And this would cover over 1,000 acres in the area of this intersection. This is going to be, at some point in our future, one of our strongest intersections in the city of Amarillo. There are a number of drainage and other infrastructure challenges that the city and the developer cannot address in and of themselves, and this is going to give us the tools we need to be able to allow this area to become the economic engine that it can be for the city of Amarillo, Randall County, and Amarillo College. So, Andrew, go ahead and give us the details. Answer any questions, Council.
And you'll see on your dais the preliminary project and finance plan was left there for you, pretty large sheets of paper that we'll reference throughout the presentation. Let me get to the next slide here. So just to cover the highlights, of course, we just talked about the success of the downtown Tiers. The ultimate Tiers benefits that are outlined in state law and through the comptroller's website is that it's helps to benefit needed public infrastructure in an area that might be lacking for adequate development to attract businesses. It encourages development, increases property values and long-term tax collections and growth. It also reduces the cost of private development by providing reimbursement for those eligible public improvements that we've discussed previously. This is a pretty common slide here that kind of shows you what Mayor and we just discussed as far as showing The base value there is in blue that shows over that time that continues to be collected by any of the taxing entities. The yellow is that increased tax base that grows over time, and that's put back into the zone. And then at the end, that new post-project AV in the orange, that's when all the taxing entities that might be participating in a new zone would collect all that revenue from the growth. But ultimately, tiers is to be a catalyst to grow and increase that property tax base of really undeveloped land, blighted property, things that haven't seen improvements in a long time, which, as I go over the details of this area, has been sitting stagnant for many years. As far as the adoption process to create a new zone, you have to prepare a preliminary financing plan, which you see in front of you on the dais. We had to publish hearing notice in the newspaper at least 7 days beforehand, hold a public hearing, and then this ordinance in front of you today would be to designate the reinvestment zone. And then when the zone is established, that establishes a board of 10 board members that would then continue to work on that project and finance plan to create a final document that would then have to come back to council again for consideration. And then after all that's done, that is when the contribution of the tax increment fund by the other taxing units would begin. Each year they're invoiced that growth and value. That money is collected and put into a fund that can only be spent in this zone. And then that's implementing the tax increment financing. That's when we work either with the city or the developers to install projects, either on the front end, get reimbursed afterwards as new property comes online. And then through the comptroller's office, there's an annual report process that we complete each year on each of our zones. As Jared mentioned, this is the location. It's 1,046 acres in the area of Hollywood and I-27. You've got Bell on the east and Coulter on the west, covering area inside the city as well as inside the ETJ boundary. And toward the center there, basically in a reverse L, is where Kids Inc. is proposed for their project. Here's another aerial of the zone. It's currently a mix of mostly vacant, undeveloped land. It's got some retail and restaurant uses with limited residential development. So about 10% of the zone has all the projects that are on it. So that just gives you an idea of how much vacant land there is, how much opportunity there is if we're able to meet the need of filling the gap on some of these infrastructure projects. There's also a large playa on the southeast side of the zone that the whole area drains to, and part of the biggest expense is really finding the way to get the drainage past all those state highways over to that playa. As far as the ordinance, these are some of the findings that are required to be included in the ordinance and found by council when considering a new zone. The first one being that development or redevelopment as a whole would not occur solely through private investment in the reasonable foreseeable future, which in that case, this has been decades in the making of undevelopable land, so that one's pretty clear. Improvements in the zone, including but not limited to those outlined to the City Council, will significantly enhance the value of all the taxable real property in the zone, will be of general benefit to the city, its residents, and property owners. The zone is also required to be within the city limits or within the ETJ or the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which it is. And then as far as other things that substantially impair or arrest the sound growth of the city, inadequate sidewalk or street layouts, faulty lot layout in relation to size, adequacy, accessibility, and usefulness, unsanitary and unsafe conditions, deterioration of site and other improvements, in conditions that might endanger life and property by fire or other causes, and then that the zone is predominantly open or undeveloped, and because of obsolete platting, deterioration of structures or site improvements or other factors substantially impair or arrest the sound growth of the city. A couple of other points that are required and shown in the findings, you cannot exceed 25% of the total appraised value of taxable real property in the city, which this falls well below. And then 30% or less of the property cannot be for residential uses either. If that were the case, it requires a petition process from the owners to be considered within a tiers. A little bit on the financials and some of the growth we've seen in that area. This top chart shows comparable to the overall city from 2012 to 2022, which is 58% growth that the city saw, and then this proposed tiers area only saw about 25% in that same time period. And then just in the last year, the city of Amarillo went up 3.69%, while the tiers area proposed was only 0.75%. So you can see the difference between the city and this area as a subset. As far as the makeup of the zone, the 2022 base year value would be just about $30 million, and then the 2042 estimate, or for a 20-year zone, the projected growth would get it to about $167 million overall. The revenue that could bring in if the city, Amarillo College, and Randall County participated would be approximately $15 million, and that's based on the following investment scenarios. As far as anchors at $52 million, retail and hotels $37 million, restaurants at $11 million, and then just other commercial activity or residential at $22 million. And then the base growth in that $30 million value would see an additional $10 million. And that new development would occur in 12 years or less, the majority in years 1 through 8, in order to encourage that growth and development. And then the tax increment participation, as opposed to Tiers 1 and Tiers 2, where it's 100% participation for 30 years. This one would be 100% in years 1 through 10, and then years 11 through 20 would only be at 50%. So the city and the other taxing entities would see those new dollars sooner rather than later by splitting it down to half the amount in year 11. And then we propose to have a similar board of directors as the other tier zones. It'd be 10, with 3 selected by the city, 3 by Randall County, and then the other entities would each have 1 for the board makeup. As far as what this zone might spend the dollars on or spend toward reimbursements to developers, it's really highly focused on infrastructure in this zone versus maybe incentives or grants or those kind of things. So it'd be intersection improvements related to water, wastewater, and drainage, potential lift station, utility main extensions, participation in arterial and collector street construction, participation in water, wastewater, and drainage construction, and then the potential is there for Chapter 380 economic development agreements, but most likely it would go toward reimbursements either to the city or the developer installing that infrastructure on the front end and then being reimbursed over that 20-year time period to recoup those costs. And then again, as I mentioned, the total estimated cost that could be financed by the proposed tiers would be up to $15 million. Any revenues that generated in excess of that would go toward the same priorities. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so Andrew, just for clarification, so there are 3 taxing entities, and that would be Amarillo College,
Randall
and then
County.
Randall County. Correct?
We've had preliminary discussions with both Amarillo College and Randall County, and they seemed amenable to participating, but we can't have the official participation agreement until a zone's established. So that would be a next step. If the city council approves, then we would go to each of them to get an agreement executed.
And this is a 20-year term.
20-year term. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Andrew. At this time, we'll open a public hearing on agenda item 3B related to ordinance number 8033. Anybody who wishes to speak for, on, or against this agenda item may have 3 minutes to do so. Anyone present who wishes to speak? Mr. Griffith?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Matt Griffith, 4211 Palacio. I wanted to speak for just a minute in favor of this ordinance. First of all, I appreciate Andrew and all of the staff that have worked so hard on this proposed tiers district. I'd just like to say that, for the past 40 years, that's hard to imagine, I've been actively involved in the promotion of and the development of Amarillo. And I love this town. And to me, it's a no-brainer to want to move your business to Amarillo, Texas. But it's not as easy as it sounds when you're talking to national developers, national businesses, and so forth that we're trying to attract to Amarillo. It's a slog, but it's worth it. And whenever they get here, they finally realize the benefit of being in Amarillo. But I can speak firsthand to the challenges that there are in trying to entice an organization, a retail shopping center, a national tenant of many names that you could all imagine that you'd like to see come to Amarillo. The problem is that they see us, but they're not sold just completely, right? So it takes a minute to get them warmed up to the idea of moving to the Panhandle. And a lot of the things that keep them from committing are lack of infrastructure. And certainly, the city has their limitations on what they can do, and they can't speculate and go spend hundreds of millions of dollars to in the hopes that something's going to be attracted to that. And we certainly can't do that either. However, we're willing to commit to a certain amount of investment as a potential developer to attract these businesses to a certain degree, and then it becomes not economically feasible. So with these sorts of incentives, that's that little added push that's needed to allow this chicken and the egg scenario to finally take place, right? The retailer says, well, we would come, we like your numbers, but we can't accommodate the drainage. You don't have a street that serves us. We don't have water and sewer provided to this particular site, and we're just not quite ready to commit. So this idea allows the city, allows the private sector to suddenly think, okay, well, if there is a hope of some incentive of getting some of that rebate, now we can kind of go out on a limb and do what we otherwise would not do. So for me, it just boils down to a but-for statement. But for this tiers district, it's highly unlikely we would want to make that sort of capital investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate the work you guys are doing on that project specifically. Anybody else who, yes, Mr. Lackey?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll be brief. I'm going to say thank you to Andrew. I'm not sure where he went. Several meetings through our process. We're just trying to build a youth sports complex. We're doing it privately. We haven't asked the city for any money. We're not going to. We're not asking for any money from this tiers district, but I can tell you these infrastructure needs that Matt's referring to are desperately needed in this area. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2016 we passed a bond to extend Coulter Road from the loop to Sundown Lane, but we can't do it because we didn't pass the drainage side of things. And so all of those things that Matt's referring to are desperately needed. Here's what I can tell you. Mr. Miller, Councilman Sauer, you went with us, and Kevin Starbuck and our Parks Director, Michael Kashuba, at Elk City right before COVID hit us. And you saw our complexes in Elk City. And our governor didn't shut us down in Elk City. We built some really pretty facilities over there through a different tax structure. And I promised them in 5 to 7 years they'd recover those dollars if they'd spend $5.5 million turfing our 2 complexes over there. Our city manager called me into his office a year ago, August, and said, Jimmy, you have missed grossly underestimated what the return on this investment is going to be. And I said, well, explain to me what you mean. He said, we recovered it in 2. $5.5 million in 2 years during a pandemic with all of the tournaments and all the activity that we host at those 2 little complexes in Elk City, Oklahoma, of a town of 12,000. Suzanne and Matt have given us 90 acres of land to put this project together out there, and we're going to get it done. We're about 17 million of the way there of this 30 million that we need. And we're raising it all privately. I'm going to disagree with Beth. Best time to plant trees 20 years ago. Second best time's today. So you've got an opportunity to plant a big tree today that can continue the growth out there in this area. I can't imagine what it's going to be, and I can't imagine the amount of money it's going to come back to this city over the 20 years. It's not coming to Kids Inc., but this city's going to benefit from it. I highly recommend y'all really consider this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate the work that you're doing. Anybody else want to speak on this item? Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion on item 3B.
Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 8033, creating South Gateway Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone number 3, City of Amarillo, Texas, for tax increment financing purposes, pursuant to Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code and its benefits to the city and the properties to be included in the zone. The 1,046-acre zone would be located in the area of Interstate Highway 27 and Loop 335. This is for a 20-year term, and it would be 100% tax rate participation in years 1 through 10 and 50% in years 11 through 20.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Powell and seconded by Councilmember Sauer to approve item 3B, which is ordinance number 8033. Are there questions or discussions about this motion? Hearing none, all of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed by the same sign? That passes with a 5-0 vote. Mr. City Manager, I just want to commend the work that you've done on this project and specifically call out Andrew Freeman, pat him on the back. I mean, what he's handed us in a packet, it's not like they just hit a button on software and it spits this out. This is a ton of work to calculate the boundaries, to comply with all of the state law with regard to tiers, and to check the boxes on all the percentages and all of that, and then to run the revenue calculations. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate the private citizens who've been a part of this process. Kids Inc., Jimmy Lackey, your leadership, Matt, Mark, we appreciate that y'all would be here today, but we appreciate that you've been supportive of this part of the process, because I agree, it is a tree, and the city will have a lot of benefit in the decades to come for it. But I specifically wanted to call Andrew out. This was his idea. It was something that he pushed for and asked council to support investigating, and we wouldn't be here without it, certainly without all the packet and the work, without Andrew's vision and leadership and Jared's support of that.
Mayor, with Jimmy and Matt and team in the room, I wanted to make sure and point out, we had Jimmy's project, the Kids Inc. project was the
catalyst.
The catalyst, great word, thank you, for us trying to get creative on how do we make development possible in this area, because it had a barrier to development for a long time. It's an obvious location that everybody would want to be with a business or anything or with a hotel, business, anything like that. And the Kids Inc. project that nobody can not get behind, everyone can get behind Kids Inc. Fields for kids and families to be able to recreate and play. It's unremarkable if you just look at this meeting. If you watch this meeting and what happened, you don't realize what happened. But Tiers 3, in addition to some other things that have happened in the city with other councils and this council, is going to be one of the biggest things that we've ever seen. It's going to be an economic powerhouse. It's going to be a power intersection like few places that we have in Amarillo. So I just wanted to, it's a little more rah-rah than what you want your city manager to say, but this is a big deal. It's a big deal, and we're excited about it. We're excited for you, Jimmy, and what you're going to be able to do, but also for development in that area. And like you said, Mayor, good job to Andrew and all of our team.
Thank y'all. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time. Item 3C is consideration of resolution number 110822-2.
All right, Mayor, we've got Emily Kohler, Assistant Director of Planning, to bring this item.
Great. Hello.
And also, we also have a guest who has already spoken once that we're excited to have with us, too.
Yes. So as a resolution, this item would typically be on consent, but we requested that it be placed on non-consent because its purpose is recognition. So we're hoping that this can be a moment of celebration. The Recognized Neighborhood Association program is new. As a council, you adopted this in August of this year. It sets organizational requirements for neighborhood associations to meet to ensure that they're running transparent organizations that fairly represent their neighborhoods. And SJN Amarillo, or SJNA, would be our first recognized neighborhood association for the city of Amarillo. Their application was reviewed by staff and recommended to the Neighborhood Planning Oversight Committee in October, and so we're bringing it to you with a recommendation for approval. You heard the journey of SJNA from the planning process to the creation of the board and organization itself, and all that they've accomplished in just a few short years. There are, I think, 4 representatives. Yeah, 4 here, and if approved, they requested that maybe there could be a photo opportunity as well. Thank you.
Questions, council, for Emily? Okay. Thank you, Emily.
Sure.
Do we have a motion with regard to item 3C?
Yes, Mayor, we do. I move to adopt resolution number 1108-22-2, recognizing the San Jacinto neighborhood Amarillo, or San Jacinto Neighborhood Association as the recognized neighborhood association for the San Jacinto neighborhood.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Powell and seconded by Councilmember Stanley to approve Resolution Number 110822-2. Any discussion or questions about the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. That passes with a 5-0 vote, and we would be delighted to come down and take a picture to celebrate. Emily, before you step away, we have how many neighborhood plans?
4.
So we have 4 neighborhood associations, but it's a lot of work to meet this criteria, and I'm really proud of San Jacinto because you guys were the 3rd city neighborhood plan, but actually the first ones to check all the boxes to be at this point. So, it's just about, this is something y'all prioritized, but well done. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, what's real interesting is each one of these neighborhoods have one up the one before them. So it'll be interesting to see what actually ends up happening with the 4th one.
Yeah, with the Eastridge, yeah.
Eastridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Spurring
Which
each
will
other
really
on.
keep Emily busy.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, item 3D is consideration of resolution number 110822-3.
All right, Mayor, we talked about this in discussion. This will be the discussion of 2 specific items, or 3 really, but landfill development for Cell 10 and also PID projects for the colonies and Heritage Hills. These are projects that were discussed during budget and are included in our existing budget. Laura Storrs, Assistant City Manager, Chief Financial Officer, and then Stephen Adams with SPS.
Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Jared. And this is the one action item that we're required to bring to you all ahead of time to start the time period for advertising, to let our citizens know that we're looking to enter into an issuance for certificates of obligation. As Jared mentioned, it will be combined into one issuance, and it will be for landfill, it will be for Colonies Public Improvement District, and for Heritage Hills Public Improvement District. Colonies has several debt issuances outstanding that they're actively paying on. And Heritage Hills, this will be their first one that the city will issue for them. Just a reminder on those that they have to set their assessments at a level that they can appropriately pay for any maintenance going on in the PID, along with this anticipated debt service, and they show it out over a 5-year plan. You all adopted their 5-year plans during our budget season, and so those have all gone into place as of October 1st, as well as we adjusted the solid waste collection fees in order to support the debt service on the landfill portion of this certificate of obligation, and that went into effect on October 1st, 2022 as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to Stephen to review.
Thank you, Laura, Mayor, members of the council. So I think Laura's laid this out already, but just to get to specific numbers, it's to the construction fund, $6.3 million to the landfill, $3 million to Colonies PID, and $1,250,000 to Heritage Hills PID. We bid that out as one project. We break it out internally, separate to the penny, give it to the city to do their budgets and to allocate the cost to the appropriate cost center. This will be a 20-year amortization, again with a 10-year call. While we're pledging property taxes to get the high credit rating, we of course aren't planning on using them. On this particular one, we're planning on taking bids at 9 in the morning and presenting it to council at 1 in the afternoon on January the 10th. Again, hopefully close on February the 16th. Here is the debt service associated with it. We'd like to point out one thing. We show a $10,550,000 par amount with a premium of $100,000. When the bids come in, we don't know if we're going to get a premium or a discount. It depends on how they place their coupons. And while it's pretty complex, if they do a coupon of, say, 6% that's higher than the true interest cost, they have to pay money to the city. If they do a 2% coupon, then that's less than that, then we have to sell more bonds for that. And so it would still be the lowest overall price to the city. But because of that, we've asked for the authorization to be up to $12 million in the publication, and that's where that is coming from. We will change the size to get exactly what we need for the construction fund, though. And that's what we'll bring the city council. Just to look at the three separate entities, you can see the solid waste system is about $490,000 per year. That's on the left. The Colonias PID is about $230,000 to $235,000 a year. And on the right, the Heritage PID, their debt service will be just under $100,000 a year as projected. Again, the timing on this one, we do have to publish 2 times in the newspaper, and that's what you're authorized today if you pass this ordinance. The first publication will be November the 17th. The second one will be on November the 24th. By statute, those have to be on the same day of the week for 2 consecutive weeks, and we can't sell the debt until 45 days after the first publication, which is why we're here today, so far ahead of a January 10th sale. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Council, do you have any questions for Stephen?
Mayor, I had a couple questions just in general on like the PID process. So is it typical to group these together on the CO?
It's typical for the type of PID that you have. There are other developer PIDs which are a lot larger that involve the infrastructure for whole development. Those are generally sold as unrated PID bonds. But for cities that have existing PIDs that are just doing, what I would consider minor improvements rather than an entire infrastructure, and there's a lot of tax base already down, it is pretty common for a city to backstop that type of PIDs such as these. Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily justify a PID bond. The CO accomplishes the same thing.
It does, and there's not near as much risk. When you do a PID bond for a development, the value's not there yet. And so that, in our view, would probably put more risk on the city than we would like to have. When we set these up originally, way back when, I think the city said when you get 75% occupied rooftops, that the city would backstop it with a PID rather than, so the developer would only own 25% of the homes. And so under that scenario, it significantly less risk to the city than a developer PID, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Adams, can you explain the CO on the landfill piece as well? Is that the only instrument available for the landfill because we house that in the general fund? Or are there other tools available?
I believe that that's for this long of a debt, that's the only one short of having an election and doing a general obligation bond. You could probably do that as well.
And can I clarify, Laura, that is in the general fund or? Okay. So not a otherwise if it was, say, water and sewer, we would do a revenue bond?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
Any other questions for Stephen? Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion with regard to item 3D?
Yes, Mayor, we do. I move to adopt resolution number 11-08-22-3, approving and authorizing publication of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation.
Second.
It's been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Councilmember Sauer to approve resolution number 11-08-22-3. Any motion, discussion, or questions about the motion? All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. That passes with the 5-0 vote. Moving on to item 3E, which is the consideration of an award for a construction contract for the new transit multimodal terminal located at 6th Avenue and Bowie Street in Amarillo, Texas. Council, Jerry Danforth is prepared to do a presentation on this item, but I think it would be wise for us to step into executive session just for a moment to discuss some legal aspects so that you're up to speed before you hear that presentation and before you have any questions about that item. So I would ask our city attorney to read our dismissal language into executive session, please.
Yes, ma'am. So the Texas Open Meetings Act, a closed session of the Amarillo City Council was announced on the 11th of November, 2022. The time is 3:31 p.m. Under the following authority, consult with an attorney about a matter in which the attorney's duty to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct for this chapter.
And I would just, clarification, it's the 8th of November. Just
It
so we're
is
on the same
November
page.
Did I say November?
You said 11th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's good. We're watching. If Frida has to remind me about public hearings, we can remind you about dates. Okay, thank you. We're adjourned to executive session.
Probably didn't need to be said. I'm sure it's pretty obvious.